Good afternoon, and thank you for coming to my presentation. Through moving online, 3 steps to creating an online program that students want. So you may be thinking about creating a new online program, and these steps will also be useful if you're creating a new online course, or if you're thinking about moving your face-to-face program into an online modality. And I know that there are some of you who have been thinking about this for a little while. And these 3 steps are going to help you think about how to do that successfully and sustainably. And when I say sustainably, I mean sustainable in an academic fashion in terms of students coming through, students doing well in the program and graduating from the course or the program, and also financially so that your course or program will be financially viable. And in doing these 2 things, you're also going to be helping to fulfill SDG 4, which we know is about education. As we go through this, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. So I want you to think of this as more a discussion. It's certainly not going to be about me just talking up here. It's going to be about us talking. And I'm going to provide some time for you to reflect on these questions with your peers and come back and report. I know that each of your institutions is different, so that your answers, and even within, especially within our own UE context, we have a lot of differences between the campuses and units. So I know that that is going to color some of your responses, but that's a good thing. So 3 steps to creating an online program that students want. The 3 steps are: you need to outline the consequences, you need to develop competencies, and you need to create collaborations. And yes, the 3 C's was deliberately done. So before I get into talking about what each of these are, I want you to understand what your task is going to be at the end of this session. So you're going to use these 3 steps as I walk through them to create a high-level draft plan of your new program proposal or your course proposal if you're doing it on a course level. If you check in the chat, you should see the link to the handout, and you're going to use the handout to walk through this. You're also going to be presenting it to your colleagues in your small group, and hopefully you'll be able to refine it using some feedback. So when you walk away from this presentation, you should have that plan almost done. It's a high-level plan, of course. All right, so let's get right into it. So the first step is to outline the consequences. We're using backwards design. Some of you will be familiar with this from Grant Wiggins. What will be the consequences of you launching this new online program? What are the outcomes that you're trying to achieve? What are your targets, and how will you achieve them? So before we even move any farther from this, I want you to think of, what do you want the consequences to be of launching this new online program? You can put your answer in the chat, or you can just take the mic and speak. Let's open it up. What are the consequences going to be of launching your new online program or course?
The thing that I've heard is that it will cannibalize the existing face-to-face. That's what I've been told. That's
Okay,
why
but
our program hasn't really flown.
okay. So you think that the consequence will be that the other program will decrease in number. All right, that's fair. That's not what you want, but okay. Other consequences? And hopefully these are desirable consequences.
One of the things we noticed during COVID was that we had we increased in numbers, and partly because we could get to some people who would have not been able to come to the face-to-face classes. So we had an increased number of people from outside of Kingston and St. Andrew. And I thought that they helped the program because some of them were pretty smart, and it would have been a shame for them not to have had the opportunity.
Right. All right. So thank you for that, Olivine. I see Anna is saying wider exposure and reduced costs. Yes, thank you. For those of you who might not have had to launch a program, think about a course, a new course that you might want to be launching. What are the consequences that you want to take place after launching this? Oops, sorry. That's should have kind of helped you actually.
Like interest in the program. So because it's online, in theory, more flexible, therefore, more persons, in theory, should be able to take the course or program.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it. And Natasha, I see your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Hi, I think Paula and took my point, but launching a new online program, one of the things that I would look to do is to broaden my enrollment base, not only in terms of numbers, but in terms of target new segments that I would not have necessarily been able to reach. So for example, online courses, if designed in a particular way, can give you anywhere, anytime access. So in terms of broadening the categories of people who could now access, I can now talk to working adults who may not have the time to sit in a traditional face-to-face environment, but the flexibility of anywhere, anytime means that they can participate in the course at their own pace based on their own schedule.
Exactly. That's really good. So those are your consequences, all positive consequences. I see people writing also greater intake, convenience. Yes. You did also hear Dr. Kavanaugh talk about some of these in terms of the target market that they're able to reach because of their online programs. So yes. And okay, so Gianna is making a point about standardization across the region with military and paramilitary forces. That's also true. If your course is online, then you can have the same course for everybody, and standardization can be achieved. Yes, Nadia, you can have it in both modalities. So those are some of the consequences you want. You want to have a higher intake, you want to reduce costs, you want to get new target markets. So let's start thinking drill down a little bit. What are your targets? You want a new market. How many students are you looking for? How much money are you hoping to make? These are targets, and that's why I have the lady aiming her arrow at the target. What are your targets? So I want you to think about that for a minute and talk back to me. What are your targets? What do you want for this program? And let's think big, shall we? If you're launching a new online program or taking the face-to-face program online, what are your targets? What do you want to do? Go ahead.
Targets is very broad.
You tell me what your targets are, because you're the one deciding that you want this
Financial, program
be
outcome,
specific. Be
success.
specific. Okay, if you take financial, for example, what's your financial target?
Generally speaking,
Go ahead.
an online version of the program should allow for profit, because it will you do the work once and it is replicable with changes, but certainly it's not as labor intensive as opposed to a face-to-face execution where you have to be there for the full time all the time. So perhaps it would allow for applicability with the appropriate adjustments for each cohort, and therefore financial savings.
Okay, I'm going to hold my response for that for 1 minute and let Natasha comment, and then I'll come back to you, Paula Ann, because you've touched on some things there. Go ahead, Natasha, please.
Right. So just being a little pedantic now, and I joined late, so forgive me if in slides 1 to 4 you are already covered. But the word online program really is very broad, and there are lots of ways or lots of different things that can fall under the umbrella of online, right? So you have e-learning courses that are developed in Articulate 360, where you stop and start as you want. You've got on Zoom classes that could fall into that online program where it's teacher-led. You have depending, so when you look in the world of education technologies, included in online program would be the self-paced, would be the Zoom classes, but you would also include things like podcasts, community-based learn, so there's a broad umbrella that captures online programs. So when you then say, well, what are your targets? I think it very much then depends on who your target audience is and what type of institution it is. And then also the design of your program. So are you an NGO that wants to design an online program to onboard new volunteers? Or are you a university that wants to deliver part of its degree program in a self-paced way? So I think these are nice general questions, but the devil appears to be in the detail.
All right, so Natasha, you are correct in saying that online is a broad term. But regardless of what type of online, whether you're talking synchronous, asynchronous, if you're talking different kind, blended, hybrid, you still need to be able to determine what your targets are, whether you're that NGO who's going to use, I wouldn't call a podcast an online program, but that's a definition that we can debate. If you're going to use an asynchronous online program, or if you're a university, you're going to have different targets. What I'm suggesting is that you have to be very specific about what you want those targets to be, because if you're not, there's no way that you can hit that target, or you're not even going to know if you met the target because you don't know what the target is. So yes, you would need to be able to define online. For me, in this particular presentation, I am really talking about asynchronous online programs, whether that's university level or any other level, it doesn't really matter, but you still need to define your targets really well. I'm going to address Paula Ann's comments, because there are some assumptions that were made there that tie also to this idea of what online is. Now, I'm at the University of the West Indies, and we have a very specific definition for what our asynchronous online courses are. And to address some of the things that she said, and some of the things that Dr. Kavanaugh mentioned this morning, there is a relationship between the cost, quality, and access. So just because you have an online program does not necessarily mean that the program will be cheaper or less time consuming to run. It will be more expensive, most likely, to start. You won't have to recreate the materials every year. Yes, you will have to update them, as she mentioned, but there are some assumptions that would probably need to be unpicked there. Setting that aside, the point that I'm trying to get at here is that when you are thinking about launching your new online program, whatever type of program it is, you need to be very clear about your targets and how you will achieve them. And I'm suggesting to you that your target is most likely, regardless of the type of program or what level it is growth. You want to have growth on two levels. You want growth in terms of academics. You want your students to do well and grow as individuals, but you're also probably looking for some financial growth as well. So I would divide the consequences into two levels: growth in an academic perspective and also from a business perspective. Because what you're actually creating in creating a new course or a new program is a new product. And I'm going to start by looking at the business perspective, because even if you're an NGO, let's say, and you're not looking to make a whole lot of money off of this, there are still costs involved. You still need to be able to manage that, and you still need to know what your targets are. In terms of higher education, although oftentimes in higher education, we don't think of it as a business, there are some ways in which it is very similar to a business, and people would go as far as saying it actually is a business. Not everyone, but it's not an unreasonable assumption. So you have to think about it, at least in some ways, in a business perspective. So I'm going to start by looking at this chart, which is a business template canvas. And you can find this also in the handout. And what we're going to look at is the yellow section. Because in order to achieve this growth, we need to think about the program in two ways, the business perspective and the academic perspective. And in my first component, the consequences, I want you to think about it in terms of the business perspective. Because when you are starting a new business or wanting to deliver a new product, which is what your online program would be, you have to think about the sections in yellow. You have to think about the problem you're trying to solve for your students. You have to think who your students are, that's the audience. You have to think about what channels you're going to use to market them. And you have to think about your competitors, whether or not you are the biggest university on the block and you can command respect, you've been around for a long time, or you're a very small startup, or you're an NGO. No matter who you are, you need to think about the sections in yellow. These are the only ones we're going to focus on today, to look at what the problem is you're trying to solve by creating this new online program. And I will bring in what Dr. Kavanaugh said. Remember, he talked about that you had to put the students at the center of it. I'm restricting my comments to higher ed for the moment, because that's where most of us are. So I want for us to break out into groups and begin to think about these four, the ones in yellow. What is the problem you're trying to solve for your client, the students? Who is the student, which is your target market? Where is your ideal student? Where do they hang out? What do they do? And who is your competition? Because in understanding these four, you will be able to think about growth. And these four are going to drive what the consequences are for launching this program. Answer the problem, the audience, the channel, and the competitors for a program that you would like to launch. If you're not in the position to launch a whole program, you could think about a course. But to answer those four questions, talk to the people in your group so that you can determine what the consequences will be of launching this new program. And then I'm going to ask you to report back. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for that lovely participation. I got to visit a couple of the rooms, and I'm going to ask one group to report on what they thought the problem was, who's their audience, what their channels were, and who was their competitor. So, which group would like to report? We're looking for one group to report on the problem, the channel, the audience.
Well, since no one's going, I'm going to volunteer my group.
Okay. Who's speaking, please?
My name is Claire. I don't even know what room I was in, but
okay. Go ahead, Claire.
our program was dealing with marketing, and I thought that we had a really fulfilling discussion. And if I may, I don't know all the things, but I'm sure when I put up, if you'd allow me to share my screen,
Sure.
I can have the members of my group certainly jump in and participate. Thank you.
Go right ahead, please.
Give me 1 second. Just trying to hit the share button. Share.
Right, that's all right.
Bang.
Yeah, it's gonna come in a minute. Oh wow. All right, go ahead, please.
Okay, so we looked at an online marketing program.
Yes.
And our audience, we were targeting adult learners. As you see here, people over 18. Oftentimes, the people who sign up for this particular program are young adults. The registrants come from all over the region, and they are often either transitioning into the field of marketing or looking for upward mobility. Some of their challenges include wanting to have work-life balance at the same time completing their program in a timely manner, because that's really important. You don't want to be spending the next 50 years, working on one program.
No,
yeah.
You don't.
And then, of course, the program should be relevant and practical to both their personal and professional development. They don't want, that you're doing the program and then you apply for the job and someone says, hey, no, that's not what we're looking for at all. The problem with developing the program would be that the program has to be designed in such a way that it's not going to interfere with, or not interfere too much, or give our participant enough time to work on it, right? Because they're adult learners, so they have work and family constraints. The content must be presented in an easily digestible manner. So they should be able to do it, when I think one of the examples is like when they're traveling, they should be able to pick up, your cell phone. Everybody has, okay, some people have data on their cell phone. They should be able to watch a video or two very easily, and be able to keep building on the information, but in small chunks. And of course, there is this need to complete the program of study again in a timely manner, because that's the major problem. The competitors, if we're designing an online program, every single other online program out there becomes a competitor because they're offering some good self-paced, flexible programs. I'd like to touch quickly on the consequences of that, because that's the only one I think I heard us talk in detail about what were some of the consequences. And the consequences of that would be that our program, therefore, would need to be cost competitive. We would have to look at the accreditation of some of these other programs. Are they going to be recognized within our region? If so, we have to make sure that ours is relevant so that people would want to take our program. And then, of course, we have the advantage that ours is often context specific. So people would, it would be more relevant just to start out to people who want to take the program. But then we also have the problem with our competitors that people can do all these micro accreditation programs as well. In terms of the channels that we can reach them, it will be primarily online. And well, we didn't get to discussing the frequency with which we would contact them and so on. And most of the people, it will be online because most of the people have a moderate degree of comfort with the online tools. So did I miss anything, team?
No,
Nope,
I think you did
covered
you did a good job.
I think you guys did a great job. You should clap for yourselves, definitely. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. You can stop sharing now because now we can see your windows. We can see your windows. Did anyone have any questions about that or the actual exercise before I move on to the next section? Sounds like no. Okay.
There is a question in the chat about how timely is timely. Do timeliness compromise quality? So team, would you all like to address that?
I would say it is a more self-based program, so timely is your time. So it's when you have the time, when you have the space, and it would be how quickly you want to complete it, as it is a self-paced program. And no, quality will not be compromised, because that is definitely one of the things that is important for quality assurance and continued accreditation. So we definitely would not want to compromise on quality.
Good answer. So in this part, you should hopefully have, Olivia, go ahead. Go ahead.
One of the things I'm thinking with that timely thing, is it that you're going to put your program on, say, like on a semester basis, or is it come as you're ready? Because one of the things I'm thinking is that for the facilitator of the program, they don't just put the program on and walk off. So if it is that I joined the program in March and other people had joined from February or January, the facilitator would continuously be going over the same points, the same topics. It's true, you probably develop a frequently asked questions section to the course, but you always still have to be going back and retracing steps. So I'm thinking that it would be important to decide if you're doing something that you offer at periods. Say it's a 3-month program and you offer it, it's a 8-week program and you offer it, or if it is something that in truth we do buy off the shelf and perhaps have a Facebook group or something like that that answers questions. Or people could scroll through and find answers to their questions. But you, the facilitator, have largely walked away.
So Olivine, I'm going to jump in because it was my guinea pig that we kind of used in the group. And this was not shared in the group, but the way in which I'm working to develop this program would just be based on the first 3 levels of Bloom taxonomy. So that sort of very
Basic.
so it's really at a foundational level.
Mhm.
And so because it's at a foundational level, all of the assessments are already built into the program. So branched scenarios, multiple choice, mix and match, that sort of thing to test the knowledge, just because it's operating at that foundation level of Bloom's taxonomy. So with that in mind, the level of output, we're not asking for a major project at the end of it, because the thinking behind the design of the program is that it's used to cover the foundation concepts for this particular subject area. And so it's designed in this particular way that you can start it at any point, and it doesn't have to necessarily be facilitated per se in terms of regulating group discussions or discussion questions. So that's very specific to how of the design of this particular course that I'm guinea pigging.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, that's a good point there. Claire, you have a question and then we're gonna go on.
Oh, well, it was just really to tack on to what was said. I think Olivine raised a really important point, though. Even if the program is completely asynchronous, it may be useful to have like a Facebook or some chat group that is associated with the course so that the members of the program can interact with each other. And if there is an opportunity to have a TA that is also associated with the course that checks in periodically to the chat group, it would be useful so that if there are any misconceptions, they can actually be cleared up over some period of time, whether the person checks in once a week, once a month, or something like that. Just a consideration. That's it.
Okay. I want to address, thank you for that, Claire. I'd like to address some misconceptions that I'm hearing in several of the comments. Because a course is asynchronous online does not mean that it's not facilitated. And by facilitated, I mean that there is a lecturer, well, what we call a lecturer, professor, a faculty member who checks into that course every single day, answers the questions for the students. They may have Zoom classes once a week or once every 2 weeks or once every 3 weeks. That course can still be asynchronous online, but it is facilitated. I don't want you to walk away from this conversation with misconceptions about what online is. I came in with some assumptions about what you understood, but some of those are being torn down as I hear some comments that are made. So because the course is asynchronous online does not mean that it's not facilitated, which means that the person who's teaching the course has to be in the course pretty much every day. So I'm hoping that that is clear. You may have synchronous sessions every couple of weeks, if that's how you choose to do it. And that is a very good model that has a high response rate and a high success rate in terms of students. So I don't want you to get into the idea that most fully online courses are not facilitated and it's just the students go in, click here, click there, listen to podcasts, watch videos, and they understand everything. That can work for a very small cross-section of courses for very targeted things, but that's generally not the way that most online courses are done. But this comes back to problem and the audience. What is the problem you're trying to solve and who is your audience? So those two will be addressed. But we can have some discussion about the structures of courses in the next section, which is the second C is develop competency. And this is where we're talking about what is it that students want? What are the key knowledge, attitudes, and skills that they need? You have started to talk about this in some of your groups in terms of what the students will actually be learning, which for us as higher education professionals, this is what we tend to focus on most. What we tend not to focus on so much is the business side. Who's the market? What is the problem we're trying to solve? Who are our competitors? All of those kinds of things, which actually drive and determine if our program is going to be successful, especially an online program. But this part we're usually pretty good at. What is the knowledge, skills, and attitudes they need? You know about the program and course outcomes. You know about the learning outcomes. What resources will they need? What experiences do they need to have? And then we get to the pedagogy, which is what Claire and several others, I think several others earlier in the discussion were talking about. So if you need your student to be able to do task X, that means that somewhere in your course, you have to teach them how to do that. You have to give them the resources to enable them to do that, whether that's a textbook, whether that is going through activities in the course, whether that is watching videos, whether that is actually having a lab where they have to manipulate things physically, or they have to go through an escape room. Whatever it is that you want them to be able to do at the end of the course, you have to give them the resources, the experiences to help them to do that. And this is where the pedagogy comes in. So you're going to make a decision about what your course is actually like. Is it going to be completely synchronous online, which is what we're doing right now? So we have a Zoom or other web conferencing technologies that we talk to each other in real time. That's fine for some online courses, but it's not necessarily good for all online courses because maybe I live in a different time zone and therefore I can't access your course when you're having it at 5 o'clock EC time. And maybe 5 o'clock here is 11 o'clock at night and I have children to look after and other things to do, so I can't access it at that time. But if it was an asynchronous online program that was facilitated, then I can access it at any time that's convenient to me. So you need to be thinking about your target market, the problem you're trying to solve, because that's also going to drive the pedagogy, which will also help to drive the assessment strategies. I would be hoping that many of you will be thinking about using authentic assessment, especially in the advent of our time right now where we're dealing with AI. Whether you choose to use AI or not, you at least need to be aware that it is out there and it does impact some of the assessment strategies that we used in the past. So we need to be thinking about some of these things. In addition, you need to be thinking about how relevant your program or course is. Is it going to help? Is it going to help students perform tasks that they would need to do in their job? Is your program going to be media rich? You have to think about all of these things if you want them to be able to, develop the competencies that you have outlined for them. So this part we do well. In order to know what students want, which is part of my title, you have to understand what the in-demand skills are. These particular skills that I have listed here came from several surveys by large companies. Coursera was one, other global education institutes. And these are the things that they are saying that these are the global skills. I'm going to give you a list of some other resources that you can find out other ones, but I want you to take a look at them because most of these are not content-based. I'm not saying the content is not important because of course it is important, but some of these skills are what we would consider perhaps soft skills or not so much content driven. But yet these are the skills that Coursera is saying, that other global entities are saying that are most needed in the marketplace and what students are looking for. So if you're going to build a program that students want, you have to build in the things that they want. And typically these things are tied to, will this program help me to get a job or move ahead in my career, in my program, in my life? So we have to be thinking about these if we're going to build the competencies that the students need and make programs that students actually want. Because a lot of the times we think about what we as the institution wants. So we have people who can teach X, Y, and Z, and we're like, yeah, we'll put out a new course in X, Y, and Z, which is all fine. But is that course going to meet the needs? We're back to the problem and the target audience out there. Is it going to meet those needs? Because if it's not, they're not going to take it. No matter how wonderful the professor may be, and no matter how many people we may have that could do an excellent job of teaching that course. So that's why I asked you to start thinking about the problem you're solving and who your target market is. Because if you don't get those right, even if you have an excellent online program, it's not going to be successful. So these resources and this list is on the handout. These are all different entities researching different places to come up with a variety of skills, and that's where I got that skill list from. The Coursera Job Skills Report draws their data from all of the MOOCs that they put out, and you would know they have in the region of 15 or 18 million students. So that's where they're drawing that data from. I'm not saying that it's the best or the only data, but it is a rich data source. And my final C, which is create collaborations. So here are my questions for you. Why do we need to create collaborations? What kinds of collaborations do we need to create, and with whom? And I have, so I'm going to ask you to, you won't be in the same group this time, unfortunately, but I'm going to give you 10 minutes to think about this for your program. Why do you need to create collaborations? What kinds of collaborations do you need to create, and with whom? So if not, they have pretty much addressed the why, which is to increase the program relevance and help students get or create employment. They also said the program is richer. This group and another group said the program is richer and more diverse if you have collaboration both internally and externally. And we're looking for opportunities for students to engage with external partners to get jobs and experience and possibly future careers. In terms of what kinds of collaborations, this was mentioned: internships, practicums, capstone projects. For example, you could do a project at the end of your program and you have industry leaders come in and assess it or give feedback to the students. You can have industry doing joint projects with the students so that they have experience actually working in the areas that they will be working on eventually. In terms of with whom, several groups mentioned this, other departments, so that you have a cross-department program, which makes it more interesting and more flexible for students. Other campuses, we have that at UE, and external other institutions, industry partners, funding agencies, charities, governments, global organizations. The field is as wide as you can think it.
One thing that I forgot to mention that our team had discussed that you didn't mention a while ago was collaboration with your IT infrastructural team. Because if you're doing an online platform, then you need to make sure that you have the capabilities, you have the software, and everything is working. So that's one thing that was also mentioned that I noticed you didn't say within your scope. So I just wanted to add that.
Yes, definitely internal collaborations. You cannot get this program off the ground without it. Because in addition to IT, you're probably going to need instructional design support, marketing support in a bunch of areas, because if the institution is not supporting your online program, it's unlikely to get off the ground. So you definitely need those collaborations.
For our group,
Go ahead.
Our group, when we spoke about what kinds, we also spoke about bringing expertise for certain areas of the content delivery. So,
yes.
I may be doing a course on X, but when it comes to a particular unit, I'm not really that versed there. So I bring in, the expertise to cover that unit or whatever. So that's from the facilitator's perspective.
Even if you are versed in that area, it might still be nice to bring in expert.
To bring in expert,
yes, for diversity, and that would be excellent. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Something that perhaps wasn't said. Okay. So, just a quick overview. 3 steps to creating an online program that students want. You have to outline the consequences. What are your targets? What is your business focus in terms of your program? What do you want to happen at the end? So if you want, as one of your targets, that you have 100 students enrolled, then you have to think about, how am I going to get those 100 students? What's the problem I'm solving for these students? Who are these students? And so on and so forth. In terms of developing competencies, we in higher education are very good at this. We know how to create the outcomes. We know how to develop the program. We can talk about the pedagogy and things like that. And the third one is to create those collaborations, both internal and external, all to the benefit of the student so that you can achieve the targets that you want. And one of those targets is for your students to be successful. So, does anybody have a high-level draft of what their program proposal would be like for a specific program that they would like to talk about in our last few minutes? No, yes. Should I pick on somebody? I hear lots of silence. All right, I won't pick on anybody. But I will say, I will actually ask, are there any questions? Is there anything that was unclear? Anything that you need some clarification on or want to re-emphasize? All right.
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Annette.
I think when we were looking at it in the first discussion group and coming at it from a perspective of the majority of the individuals in here are in higher level education, I was coming at it from the perspective of a business perspective, dealing with entrepreneurs. The original question, when you think of what problem are you solving, you know, two aspects that you can look at it from, which I think both aspects kind of came about, is are we considering the problems that the students are going to face, or are we looking at targeting at the problems that the university is going to face in implementing this program? And I think a lot of times that's what people kind of look towards. What are the problems that we're going to run in with implementing this program? But I think if we start, you know, like you said, with what is the problem that we're solving for the students, if we look at it from that perspective, I think it makes it a lot easier to build a program and making sure that it's going to meet the needs of the students and not necessarily a program that's just going to be convenient for the university.
Thank you for that, Annette. That's an excellent point. And it's a pivot point for most institutions because that's not where they start. But we really do need to be starting at the problem for the student. So what issue is the student experiencing that we can solve for them? Is it that they're finding it hard to find a marketing course that can meet the needs that they have because they work full-time and they can't give up their job? Is that the need that we're trying to meet? Is it that the student can't find a pharmaceutical course that is accredited with this particular accreditation agency? It's not the problem for the institution, it's a problem for the student. Because if you focus on the problem for the institution, the student kind of gets lost or added on at the end. If you focus on the problem for the student and you fix that problem, you have to know who that student is. Who's your target market? What do they want? How do they act? These are the things that companies like Apple and several other companies who do really well, that's what they do. They figure out what the needs of the market are, and then they create stuff to meet those needs. And even though we don't think of ourselves as a business in higher education, this is still what we are doing. We are creating products, the courses, the programs for our clients who are the students. And the more effective we can be at meeting their needs, at solving their problems, the more successful we can be as institutions. So thanks for bringing that up. Annette, any other questions or comments? Makeda, go ahead, please.
Hi, am I being heard clearly?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
Great. So just to comment on that as well, I think it's interesting to look at the intersection of the needs and the social responsibility of education, and it's inserted into the context in conjunction with the other needs that students may be presented with. And the context that we're in currently is a post-pandemic context, with the impacts of that being people recovering from social isolation and how that has contributed to their mental health, as well as the data that exists around the impact of screen time and how that correlates to mental health disorders such as anxiety and depression, specifically around young persons, which may be the age group that's now exactly aging in to higher education post-pandemic. So they would have been teenagers during the pandemic itself, but now they're starting to step in to higher education. So taking that into consideration, how do we then navigate that dynamic and not just look at the education and how it's being offered in isolation, but in conjunction with the other challenges and the other needs that present themselves in terms of having a need to not be over consuming screen time. But yes, of course, they want to be employed, they want to have access. They are the needs that are coexisting at the same time. So how can those be taken into consideration as course design and development is undertaken?
I don't know if I have an answer for that, so I'm going to put it out to the entire team. I would, one caution that I would be careful of, and this is something that Dr. Kavanaugh mentioned today as well, is, and this is not to say that we shouldn't take those things into consideration, but I think we also need to think about what needs are there that we as the institution can actually meet, because we cannot meet all. So, and this takes us back to what's our mission, what's our vision, and what can we actually do well? Within that context, yes, I think that we should look to address those. I don't know if I have an answer for your particular question in this particular context, but I'm willing to throw it out to anyone else who thinks that they could answer. But it's a very good question, Makeda. Any takers?
I'll be honest, and I think it's a study in itself, so I don't want anybody to feel intimidated.
It could be, Makeda. You might be onto some groundbreaking research right there.
Yeah.
All right. So, ladies and gents, I would like to thank you for your participation and your time today. You have been a wonderful audience, and I thank you for the discussions. And